and welcome to our talk, Chiapas, a glimpse of its natural beauty. And as you can already see in the title, this really can only be a glimpse, but we would like to inspire people and encourage people to venture a little further south than you usually do. So here's Mexico. I hope you recognize the outskirts or that country. And the red down there, that will be the state of Chiapas. It's the 8th largest and southernmost state of Mexico. It has a generally humid tropical climate, and on the mountain ranges that run through central Chiapas, the climate is more moderate and foggy, and you also can find cloud forests. Of course, there's many Mayan, ancient Mayan ruins. There's tons of stuff to see. It is also home to one of the largest indigenous populations in Mexico. They have 10 recognized ethnicities in Chiapas. Here is a more detailed map of the state, and with my cursor, I will show you more or less where we will be taking you through. So we will be starting in Oaxaca. Of course, you never ever can get tired of Oaxaca. That was a little lie earlier on. So we will be starting in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec and then jump over to Ocosocoautla and then go on to Chiapa de Corzo and then up into the highlands more to the area around San Cristobal, and then drive down Comitan and down here to the border with Guatemala. And then we'll take you all along that carretera fronteriza with the border with Guatemala, turn around, go northwest. Up here, that will be this ruin site, Yaxchilan, that you did see a picture before. And then from Palenque, we'll be jumping to the Yucatan Peninsula, but I will be showing you a map a little later on. Okay, so let's start in Oaxaca. That will be Agave istmensis. Those plants are probably not the best looking ones, but they were burned, well, the area was burned down. That's why they look a little sad. In the background, the isthmus and the outskirts of Salina Cruz. And this is still the same locality. We took this into the show because we wanted to show you the variation of Agave istmensis. This really, really nice plant with those leaf imprints and that great blue color. If you go a little inland, you can find more Agave istmensis, and this picture was taken at the very end of the dry season. So you can see how the difference between dry and wet season affects those plants. Istmensis was described not that many years ago, in 1993. It's closest to Agave potatorum and also Agave pygmaea, which is a synonym of Agave semanniana. These plants, still the same locality, a little happier. You can see that they can form large clusters. And the rosettes, it's pretty small plants. They reach a diameter of about 10 to 14 inches. And here they grow together with that spectacularly colored Hechtia rubicunda. And also at that same place, you can find Melocactus corvispinus. So now we're jumping over to Ocosocoautla in Chiapas. Now everything else will be in Chiapas. That's about more or less the type locality. You can see that grassland and you can spot those plants growing here. Istmensis is a very variable species and usually has many leaves. The interesting thing about that locality was that the plants didn't form large clusters. It was more like single plants or with 2 or 3 pups. Greener plants, some of them glaucous, bluish, and this more a bonsai form, probably not growing in that much earth. And just spectacular with the leaf imprint and those beautiful teeth. And that's at the same place, just on top of that little mesa. We labeled that plant Affinity semanniana. The plants more or less fit the description of semanniana pretty well, but I'm sure there will be somebody out there who might make a new species out of this. So Semaniana is described as open, compact rosettes with recurved leaves, and then it has those margins with distinct prominences and also very distinct marginal teeth. This one, a very nice one with those teeth on those prominences. And of course, there's always the exception to the rule. Here you have one that has almost no marginal teeth. And then the baby, a young one that found its home in an old dead Agave semaniana. Still more or less in the same general area, we labeled that one Affinity angustiarum. Again, the description fits these plants pretty well. The larger tree you would see here, that would be a Plumeria species. Here you have angustiarum, described mainly from eastern Guerrero, but it occurs all the way from Jalisco through Michoacan, Mexico, Morelos, Puebla, and down south into Oaxaca and probably here, Chiapas. The plants are described as having long, slender leaves, which are toothless towards the spine. And you can clearly see that they really don't have any teeth towards that spine. The plant in the center here, those rare, interesting stalks, that would be a terrestrial orchid, Certopodium punctatum. And I'm sorry, or we're sorry for that picture. It was noon, the sun was just burning down, and there was no way to shade that whole scene here. That's again Agave eastmensis, a little shaded and protected by a leafless jatropha. And these plants here, they grow on little mounds of, or little islands of dirt on this rock face. You can see an opuntia, and you have that same Certopodium orchid again, this time with leaves. And just to show you the variety of these plants, that would probably not the one that Kelly or Jeremy or some other nursery guys would want to have in their nursery, but still you can see the variation of these plants. Also together growing with the eastmensis is Hechtia glomerata. We will be seeing more pictures of that plant in just a little while. And again, one of those little islands, and you can see at this place the plants really form larger clusters. And still on those same rocks, Dion merole, a species from Oaxaca and Chiapas. In the background, you can again see those agaves, the same angustiarum. And here, larger plants of the same Dion, that was at the end of the rainy season. So you still have all the vines crawling and creeping around, growing over everything. It was not a lot of fun to climb around those rocks and climb on top of those rocks because of all the spines and the vines and everything you had to fight your way through. And of course, Dion is a perfect place for other plants to grow on, like this orchid, but you can also find Mammillarias, Echeveria, Sedum, Valadia, many more things growing on Dions. So now we're moving east to Chiapa de Corzo, a very nice little town. It has probably the largest central plaza that we have ever seen in Mexico, except of Mexico City. And you would go to Chiapa de Corzo to take an excursion into the Sumidero Canyon. And that's this very impressive canyon. Its formation started about at the same time as your Grand Canyon in about 35 million years ago. Those cliffs you see here, they can reach a height of 3,300 feet. And those narrows, they go on for about 9 miles. So you take a tourist boat, but it's a fun thing to do. And of course, the captain wants to give you a good time. And so they bring apples that they throw to those cute little spider monkeys. And the ride takes you by seasonal waterfalls and karst formations. And of course, you can see many plants. First of all, they call this the seahorse stalactite up here. Then we think the columnar on the right, that will be Cephalocereus nitzanensis. And then you have the first agave here, Agave cavensis. I will tell you about that in just a second. More agaves and tillandsias. It's incredible how these plants, not the tillandsias, but the agaves, can thrive in this vertical rock. Here more agaves, and the tillandsia, I will not even try to pronounce the species name. Thank you, Pam, for the tillandsia IDs. That's species of tillandsia was described as a variety of tillandsia jonanta, but now was raised to species level, and it grows exactly above the Rio Grijalva on these cliffs. But now back to this Agave cavensis. The plants were described from a sterile living plant cultivated at Kew. That's how it got its name. But then in 1990, Bernd Ulrich, a German agave enthusiast, and really he studied the agaves probably like nobody else in his time, came along, and he named them. He was not, he didn't think that Jacobi was correct, so he named them Agave grijalvensis, which would probably be the better name for the plant. And he thought they were closest to Agave marmorata. And if you look at the plant, you say, well, yeah, why not? But of course, in 1990, he didn't have the possibilities that you have now. And now some Mexicans came along and did some AFLP. So I looked that up. I have to read this. It means amplified fragment length polymorphism. And that's used in genetics research. And so these guys, they found out that Agave cavensis is widely separate from marmorata and is actually closest to Agave cisalana, which Jacobi said all along, and Gentry too. And so grijalvensis is just a synonym of cavensis. That's the whole story of that Agave cavensis, and that's another shot of it. Probably not the most attractive plant, but still, if you're in the area, you probably want to go and see it. And that's picture was taken in the summer. The problem is that those seasonal rivers and arroyos, all the garbage that people throw away with the rainy season, everything is swept down into that canyon, and then there's a 90-degree curve in that canyon. So this makes it really difficult for the garbage to get anywhere. And they extract about 5,000 metric tons per year out of that of garbage out of that canyon. And in the boat, the captain really had to turn off the engine and like paddle his way through that field of garbage so to not damage his engine. Then there's a road driving up and going more or less along the cliff, the side of that canyon, and there's about 5 or 6 viewpoints where you can look down into the canyon. And that's about the only decent picture we have of Agave Garcia Martinezi, which was described last year, 2021, from the Sumidero Canyon, restricted to that area, the description says, and similar to Agave pendula. Now moving on to San Cristobal de las Casas, a very beautiful city with lots of churches, arts, crafts, plazas, colonial houses, whatever you want. This is really a nice place to visit. It lies at about 6,900 feet and is said to have a mild subtropical highland climate. I don't know why they got, well, how they figured out mild, because even if you're there in the summer when it's supposedly hot, it was pretty cold at night and in the morning. Not far from the main plaza, and partly open air market, fantastic with all these women selling their produce and all the colors and everything. The selection of chiles and all the colors and smells of that fruit and vegetables. And around San Cristobal, you can find Agave chiapensis, also described many, many years ago in 1866. Medium-sized plants, forming large, or they may be forming large cespitous clones. They kind of have like egg-shaped ovate leaves. That would be the one you would like to have. I hope this will never ever grow any bigger. It might not, because it grows in that narrow crack here with almost no dirt, forming those clones. And you can see very typical for Agave chiapensis, those tiny little black teeth. I don't know. Also typical the dense inflorescence with the very large flowers. And just outside of, on the outskirts of San Cristobal is a little park. You can walk along a river, and you can also climb up to the rocks. That's where you would find more clones of Agave chiapensis. Very beautiful, that grass green color and the black teeth. Another plant, mostly epiphytic up high in the cloud forest, is Echeveria rosea. It has a wide distribution from central Mexico all the way south to Chiapas. Little subshrubs up to 10 inches tall, and very conspicuous that inflorescence. That one didn't want to grow on a tree and instead opted for the forest floor. And here you have another epiphytically growing plant with that inflorescence. So if you want to have a little fun for a while and you have Eric Walter's book about Echeverias, go and have a look at his color descriptions. I will read you the one that he has for Echeveria rosea. So he says, leaves lettuce green and somewhat glaucous when young, later light brownish olive, peduncle adjuratum violet, lower bracts as leaves but tinged deep vinaceous, upper bracts, bractlets and sepals, daphne pink to purplish vinaceous, corolla citron yellow, tips of petals Corinthian red, carpels dull green yellow. So with some of these colors, I wouldn't even know what they look like, but it's certainly a lot of fun to read his description. Also up higher up, Epidendrum radioferens, a terrestrial orchid from Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. And now we're along north of San Cristobal towards Ocosingo. In the distance, you can see the Montes Azules, which are the blue mountains. Very nice forested area. And there's a Tonina archaeological site. It's a day trip from San Cristobal. It is very nice to visit because there's not that many tourists and you can still climb on top of all these buildings and structures. And we did also see this golden colored frog at that same site. Still around San Cristobal, you can find Echeveria bella. There's a Forma bella, which according to the books grows west of San Cristobal. And then there's Forma major, which we will be seeing, which grows north and northeast of San Cristobal. These are little plants, pretty variable, nicely colored. And of course, this one didn't go according to the book because that would be the larger leafed Forma major, but it occurs together with all those other Forma bella plants west of San Cristobal. And these plants, they had a little pest nibbling at them, but the flowers are really pretty nice. You wouldn't spot the plants just driving along the road. They're really inconspicuous, but in the summer when they're flowering, you can't miss those bright, bright orange, yellow tipped flowers. And that would be the Forma major, growing north and northeast of San Cristobal. It's just a larger leafed variant. This was first described as variety major, but Myron Kimnack said, although distinguishable from the narrow-reliefed variety bella, this taxon hardly deserves more than form status. And add another one, Forma major, growing north of San Cristobal. Not the best picture of epiphyllum. We don't know the species, but there's certainly epiphyllums in Chiapas, and unfortunately that flower was not open yet. Pam again, Tillandsia ponderosa, it's her ID. Beautiful plant with that bright, large inflorescence occurring from Mexico, in Chiapas, all the way to Honduras, growing mostly epiphytic, also in a tropical wet biome. And then we looked that up in a book of the Chiapas orchids, and it keyed out to be Prostechea ocracea. I'm sure you would pronounce that completely differently. Very cute little orchid from Mexico south to Panama. Very interesting colored little flower. And this is, we think, Villardia recurva. The genus Villardia is a little difficult. There's also not that many pictures out there, and most descriptions are from many years ago and include like 2 or 3 lines only. So it's hard to determine sometimes. They almost look a little like pine tree branches, but of course small. And here you would have the flower of that species. And while driving through Mexico and of course Chiapas, you can see many interesting things. Fortunately, we didn't need any dental work done at that time, but this here is a place where you can get dental prostheses and other dental work done. And of course, fortunately, it was also closed. Then this is typical for Chiapas. In many streets, you have signs that advertise what you can do, but they mostly advertise what you shouldn't do. Of course, you shouldn't drive too fast and drink alcohol and do drugs and do many other things. But look at the last point. It's forbidden to urinate and defecate in this street. So if they catch you, you need to pay a fine of about 3,000 pesos. That would be $150. And a little further downhill of San Cristobal, we came to a place called La Granadilla. And of course, the fruit you're seeing here is a passion fruit. It's called Granadilla, that's the common name of it. It's mainly cultivated in the Andes for export. And at that same Granadilla place, we did find an Echeveria relabeled affinity Gibiflora. Gibiflora again has a wide distribution and is also a very variable plant. That one, again, very colorful leaf color, probably Eric Walter would describe that color as vinaceous. And here's Agave Hiemiflora. We were on the road twice with my brother and my niece. And so if you have ever been on the road with people that are not as interested in plants as you are, you know how difficult it is to just let them sit in a car along the road and take your time to take all the pictures. So sometimes, you know, we had to be a little quick. And that was the case with this flower stalk of Hiemiflora. But here it is. It's from Chiapas and Guatemala, related to Agave semaniana and Congesta, 2 species we will be seeing in a while. Here's the plant. I read that the plants are used for fiber, and also that they're listed as vulnerable. That might be because they're used for fiber, but also probably because if you remember the flower stalk pick, because people, you know, plant their cornfields, and those fields, well, the plants need to give way for the fields. It's another plant, very nice leaf imprint, very nice teeth. And here's Agave Congesta, the flower stalk first. That's how the plant got its name, of that congested condition of the flower or the inflorescence. Here, a closer up, you see the top is still flowering, and the lowest ones, there's already green capsules forming. Very large flowers and very like congested, those umbels. And these are the plants. They're much larger with more numerous leaves than Hiemiflora. And they grow scattered around San Cristobal de las Casas. Again, another one with this beautiful leaf imprint and those regularly spaced teeth. And here one with very nice curly spines. And of course, not only we have pests and bugs in the greenhouse or in the garden, they're also out there in nature. And driving south from San Cristobal de las Casas towards Comitan, you can find Echeveria gudeliana, which was described about 10 years ago in a very strange place, International Cactus Adventures Journal. It's from Chiapas and adjacent Guatemala. Those plants are said to be related to Echeveria bicochii, but the ones we did see here at that place, they certainly looked more like an Echeveria gibiflora. But who knows, we might have go to Guatemala and see the plants over there. Agave semaniana, the inflorescence, very typical roadside shot with that blue plastic jug alongside the plant. Semaniana, again, those medium-sized rosettes with the recurved leaves, the prominent margins and the teeth. the scattered populations from Chiapas to Honduras and northern Nicaragua. It's an interesting story. It was always believed to have been first mentioned in a plant catalog in 1867, and that it was sent to Europe by German botanist Dr. Berthold Seemann. That's why they named it Agave seemanniana. But in fact, plants were sent back from to Copenhagen from Nicaragua in 1848, and then flowered 70 years later. Just imagine those plants being in Copenhagen for 70 years until they flowered. They probably had them in 10-inch pots or something. So they flowered in 1918 and were then named Agave guatemalensis, which is now a synonym of seemanniana. As you can see, and if you remember the other plants at the very beginning, very variable in leaf form and size and also leaf margin. So here we still have this as Agave pygmaea. Of course, this is a synonym of seemanniana, but to have one more species in the presentation, we put it in as pygmaea. Those plants are really small, small to very small rosettes. And if you wouldn't know that this is Pygmaea seemanniana, you might even take them for Agave istmensis. And the difference to seemanniana is, as you can see, that they're very cespitose. So Gentry found this population or the plants on white limestone and says it might only be a depauperate form generated by the arid limestone, and that with a further studies, it might be reduced to subspecific rank, and Bernd Ulrich did just that. He described it as subspecies Pygmaea, but then it was sacked completely and now just is a synonym of Agave seemanniana. Again, very istmensis-like plant. To the left, you have the Hechtia glomerata. This would be the Hechtia, a little plant. The plants there, they're really spectacularly colored. And so the funny thing at that place is if you're along the road and in that white limestone with the direct sunshine and not that much, very dry and all, the plants really look like pygmy plants, istmensis. But if you climb over that little hill and a little down that slope into where there's more trees and more shade, the plants grow considerably bigger. They still have offsets. So that's still the same plant. They just grow like 10 feet apart. And the green one we would still call Angustiarum. But back to the other side where the nicer plants are, you can really see that they could be mistaken if you just look at them like that for istmensis. And of course, the plant in the background, Kelly would never ever want that in his collection, or you would not buy that at his nursery. You would go for the ones on the left or the one in the center. And for me also for that Hechtia. And that was just a very nice shot, that roadside cut with the limestone, just almost like a painting with those dark purple colored Hechtias and the agaves. And while climbing around there, taking pictures of the agaves, we stumbled over that little Echeveria goldmanii. Very cute little plants with that almost black leaf margin, named in honor of Edward Alfonso Goldman. He was an American zoologist and botanist and described over 300 new mammals. And he also has various mammals and birds and a lizard, a snake, a turtle, a frog, and a mollusk named after him. And in Baja California, there's even a Goldman Peak. So here's more of that Echeveria goldmanii, very well adapted to its surrounding. You can see here, pretty difficult to see if you're not, looking out for those little rosettes. And here finally, Hechtia glomerata. Common name is guapilla, from guapo, which means beautiful, nice, cute. Occurs from southern Texas all the way through Mexico and into Guatemala. Those plants there, they were just spectacular. So you wanted, well, at least me, I wanted to have everyone, and I wanted to take a picture of every single one. More red, less red, but just very colorful. And also there was this peperomia species growing in that limestone road cut. If you go above 4,500 feet, something like that, you can find tree dahlias, that's Dahlia imperialis. They can reach a height of about 30 feet. And you can clearly see that the stalks are like bamboo-like. And I mentioned that in another presentation, I don't know where, there was an American company, they made a produce that was called Tacopa, and that was a coffee substitute out of roasted dahlia tubers. That's the flower of Dahlia imperialis, and actually you can eat most dahlia tubers. They say the texture is crisp and juicy, and the dominant flavor ranges from bland and starchy to mildly sweet. So we're moving now along that carretera fronteriza with the border to Guatemala. There you can visit the Lagunas de Montebello, which is the first national park in Chiapas, established in 1959. It consists of 59 multicolored lakes. The color of those lakes depends on the mineral content of the water. Those lakes, by the way, in 2009, they were made a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And on the way there, we found this Furcrea samalana, named for the Samala Valley in Guatemala. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of the plant because that plant or the plants that were growing there were so hidden in that brush. And in the summer, in the rainy season, with everything growing above and around it, it was just impossible to get through to the plants and take a picture. But here's the flower stalk, and here are those greenish, yellowish colored nice flowers. The common name of that plant is ixtle or mecate or maguey ixtle, and the fiber is used for making ropes for hammocks and nets. So if you drive along that road, this is really jungly, tropical forest, and all the trees are covered with bromeliads, ferns, epiphyllum, just a ton of plants growing on those trees. I guess that would be more of the Tillandsia ponderosa, and that is Tillandsia lampropoda. I looked up lampropoda. It means bright foot. I don't know where that came from, but probably somebody of you has an idea. So this Tillandsia is native to Oaxaca and goes down all the way to Panama. Here, another one of those really beautifully colored lakes. And we think that might probably be another locality for Garcia martinezi. You can see the plant here growing in all the rest of that greenery. The flower stalk certainly would fit the description. More of that plant hidden in the shrubs, and that plant in the foreground you'd see that's a large terrestrial orchid, Sobralia macrantha. That would be the flower of that species, very large flower too. Wide distribution from Mexico all the way to Costa Rica. So on the left, that would be Chiapas, and on the right, that's Guatemala. And down here, if you look closer, Bocarnia goldmanii. And down here below us is the Rio Santo Domingo. This is the steepest kayakable river in the world. It's the holy grail of big drop, steep creeking, and it has class 5 rapids. So if there's any kayaking person in the audience, or really adventurous person, that would probably be your next destination. And that's just a shot along the road somewhere up into a palm tree towards the sky. Really dense forest. And we went up to an ecotourism place called Las Nubes. In the summer, we were actually the only ones. Here you have that same river again. And with the rainy season, the river has that strange color. It can also be really brown, as you will be seeing in a second. Usually in the winter, that the color of the river is this bright light blue. Same river at Las Nubes. You can do kayaking here, zip lining, and there they also have a walk through the jungle. Very nice with all the orchids and ferns and everything growing on those trees. Here's the river again. That was just after a night of thunderstorms, and after that, the water really came almost all the way up to our cabana. And along that walk, we found Agave pendula, described from Chiapas and western Guatemala, also in central Veracruz. very few leafed plants with a very, very long stem. You can here see the stem, how this plant is crawling over the edge here. Not the most attractive plant, but it's also hard to grow in, you know, below all these leaves and below all that greenery in the shade. And Las Nubes is famous for the toucans, keel-billed toucans that flock here to these trees in the early morning. Very beautiful bird. Also called the rainbow-billed toucan or the sulfur-breasted toucan, occurs from Mexico all the way to Colombia. And that's the river again. Unbelievable that you can swim in here, but not here, of course. And driving along that road, there's a few ranches, a few little villages, and of course, no big gas stations. And that's these are places where you would fill up your tank and you never know what you get, of course. And here we're near Yaxchilan in Frontera Corozal. That is the Rio Usumacinta. We're still in Chiapas. And on the other side, you would have Guatemala. So you would take a boat that takes you downriver for about half an hour to go see the Yaxchilan ruins. Go the earliest in the morning you can, and then you're really alone. Many Comidorea species there, but this was especially nice with those fish-tailed leaves. And we did also see this plant. Pam suggested Pitcairnia tabuliformis. My plant app mentioned something like Costus, the genus Costus. It certainly looks very interesting. And there is this Matelea. Inops would be the species that grows in that general area. Again, a very interesting little flower. So now we're taking that big jump. We still have Chiapas here in red. I don't know if you're beach people, if you are, and all-inclusive hotels here more or less would be Cancun. Down here is Tulum. Here's Merida and here's Campeche, just to give you an idea. So those triangles, that would be localities for Manfreda paniculata, and the little circles, that would be Manfreda petzkinil. And we will be seeing those in a moment. So this is along the northern coast up there, Agave furcroides. And one of those haciendas, the Yucatan Peninsula is famous for its the old haciendas. Some are made into restaurants or very expensive boutique hotels, and some have still a little museum. You can see those little cart tracks. That's how those furcroides leaves would be brought to the hacienda. And then for the tourists, they still have this. You can see the fiber. That's what they make out of Agave furcroides. Here more of the agave. The common name is Enequén. That's the fiber agave of Eastern Mexico. It's, by the way, now also used for making an alcoholic beverage called sisal, which would be similar to mezcal. And you can see they cut off those lower leaves of the plants. And so these plants develop a large trunk over the years. The fiber is said to be resistant to seawater and very, very coarse, very strong. And if you want to use it for more finer artifacts, if you see those fiber artifacts in Mexico, they're mostly made of Agave sisalana and other fiber agaves and not furcroides. So since we did see bats 2 weeks ago, we thought we'll show you a little more bats. That's near Conwas, which is the entrance to another favorite ruins of ours, Calakmul. And in the late afternoon, you go there to see those bats. The cave has seven different species. This is about 3.5 million bats flying out of the cave. They need 3 hours to get out and 3 hours to get back in. And the hole where they come out from measures about 27 feet wide to 10 feet tall. And that whole cave is half a mile long. So this is a really pretty amazing sight, all those bats. And you can still take pictures and use your phone or take videos if you want to. So back on that northern coast, Bocarnia pliabilis, that plant is probably a little taller than I am, and I'm not that tall. It's difficult to take pictures of that species They grow in that thorny, dry forest. You can see those heads peek out of the forest, but to get there, it's just an impossible fight through that forest. And here we have the first of those Manfredas. Manfreda was put as a subgenus into agave, so it's called Agave paniculata. These plants are very unusual for the subgenus because of their huge inflorescences and also because of the production of bulbils. Also, the lowland tropical habitat is very unusual for Manfreda. And here you can see these were growing somewhere where there was livestock present, which that also liked those tender leaves. The plants are really hard to find. We had a hard time. Fortunately, it was like a one lane, not much traveled road, and we drove it up several times, miles up and miles down, until Martin finally spotted an old flower stalk that turned out to be a real flower stalk and not only a branch or a dried tree. It's also cultivated as an ornamental and also found in the area or near cenotes, and cenotes would be sinkholes. This is the plant grown from seed in our garden, a very attractive plant, of course, not as big yet. And here's the one that we got from Kelly Griffin. And he told us that he got his plant from Stephen Hammer. And from there, I have no idea, but it just flowered this year and now makes seeds in our garden. So the inflorescence really fits the description of paniculata. If you drive through Yucatan, there's these cenotes, the sinkholes, and this is a really fabulous way to cool yourself off because it's pretty hot in Yucatan all year long. And so you can jump into that refreshing water. You can also see plants. We don't know if you should call this an ugly, strange Agave pendula or an even uglier, stranger Agave furcroides. Of course, there's birds. The russet-crowned motmot from western Mexico all the way to central Guatemala. Very beautiful bird. And at that cenote, we did just see there were many, many of these birds flying around. And then also a golden-fronted woodpecker. This one occurs from southern Texas all the way to Nicaragua. And so here we have Agave petzkenil, that would be me on the left, and that big, sweaty, smiling, happy guy, that's Edilberto Ucan. And the story is that in the first description, we had a locality near a cenote, a sinkhole, and a guy on a motorcycle said, yeah, that's this sinkhole because it's not, you can't swim in there anymore. So it's not, but he said it belonged to a drug guy. So we really didn't want to trespass too long, but we couldn't find a single plant around the sinkhole. And the next locality was along the toll road. And this is difficult if once you're on, where do you get off? Besides they're constructing that stupid Tren Maya, so it's even more difficult. And then, but there was the word or the place Pixoy named. So we got to that village and I asked in the first little store and the girl was really afraid of me. And the second one was of no help either. And the third one asked her father, and her father said, yeah, I know these people. They just live down the street, drive 3 blocks and ask for Edilberto Ucan. And that's what we did. And we did find him, and I showed him the first description on my phone. And he was really happy, said, oh, yes, I discovered these plants, and I'm the first collector. And we can't go along that toll road because of the Tren Maya thing, but he knew a place just a few kilometers outside of that little village. So we took him in the rental car and he drove us, well, we drove there, and it would have been impossible to see the plants or to find the plants ourselves. They were so inconspicuous, in that roadside with all the brush and all the leaves and everything. Looks kind of similar to the other one, but those plants are much smaller than the paniculata. Also, the inflorescence is much smaller. And we drove back half a year later, we came back. We promised him a Swiss chocolate, and friends brought the Swiss chocolate from Switzerland. And so we brought him the chocolate, and he was surprised to see us. He thought we would be coming back much earlier, but he didn't consider that it's a 3,200 miles distance between where we live and where he lives. Very attractive plants, again, also used for ornamentals. And that's the plant in our garden grown from seed. Very nice with those red spots. And with that picture from another one of those huge rivers, this one actually in Tabasco, we say thank you. And we hope you have enjoyed the presentation.